The palace walls were 12 feet high, lined with broken glass embedded in concrete, and topped with razor wire that glinted like teeth in the Egyptian sun. I stood at the base of that wall at 3 in the morning, barefoot, wearing nothing but a torn nightgown, my hands bloody from my first failed attempt to climb. Behind me, I could hear the guards' boots on marble floors, their walkie-talkies crackling with urgent Arabic. They were coming. And when they found me, Prince Amir would make sure I never tried to escape again. I pressed my forehead against the hot stone and whispered the only prayer I had left. Jesus, if you're real, if you really saved me like they said you did, I need you to do it again. I need a miracle. Right now. Or I'm going to die in this golden prison. My fingers were shaking. My legs were weak from 3 days without food, punishment for refusing to convert to Islam, for refusing to marry the prince, for refusing to forget the name of Jesus even when they beat me for speaking it. The courtyard smelled like jasmine and chlorine from the pool, such beautiful scents masking such ugly evil. Somewhere in the palace behind me, in his silk-sheeted bed, the prince was sleeping. He thought I was locked in my room. He thought the sedatives he'd forced down my throat had knocked me unconscious. He didn't know I'd learned to hide them under my tongue. He didn't know I'd been planning this escape for 2 weeks, ever since the night he told me, "You'll never leave here alive. You're mine now. And if I can't have you willingly, I'll break you until there's nothing left but obedience." I looked up at that impossible wall. 12 feet. Broken glass. Razor wire. And even if I made it over, there were armed guards at the gate, security cameras everywhere, and the prince's family had connections to the Egyptian intelligence services. I was a Sudanese refugee with no passport, no papers, no proof I even existed. If they caught me, I'd disappear. Just another foreign girl who ran away. Just another body the Nile would swallow. The boots were getting closer. I could hear voices now. Check the garden. Check the pool house. Find her. I gripped the wall. The broken glass cut into my palms immediately, warm blood running down my wrists. I pulled myself up 6 inches. Then a foot. My bare feet scrabbled against stone, finding impossible footholds in the tiny cracks between bricks. I didn't know how I was climbing. My body was weak, starving, drugged. But someone, was pulling me upward. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. I chanted it like a mantra, like a lifeline, like the only truth left in the world. I was 8 feet up when the searchlight hit me. White and blinding and hot. A guard shouted, "There. On the wall. She's climbing the wall." I looked down. 3 guards were running toward me, rifles raised. I looked up. 4 more feet to the top. 4 feet to razor wire that would shred my skin. 4 feet to freedom or death, I didn't even know which anymore. I just knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't spend one more night in that gilded bedroom with its locked door and its windows that didn't open. I couldn't endure one more morning of the prince stroking my hair while I pretended to be unconscious, whispering his plans for our wedding, for my conversion, for the sons I would give him. "Stop or we'll shoot." The guard's voice echoed off the palace walls. I didn't stop. I pulled myself higher. The glass was tearing my hands apart. I could feel the warmth of blood, the sting of pain, but I didn't care. Pain meant I was still alive. Pain meant I was still fighting. My hand reached the top of the wall. My fingers wrapped around the razor wire. It bit deep, slicing to bone. I screamed, couldn't help it, but I didn't let go. I pulled myself up, throwing my leg over the top, feeling the wire tear through the thin fabric of my nightgown, feeling it cut into my thigh, my hip, my stomach. Blood was everywhere now. Hot and sticky and too much of it. But I was over. I was on top of the wall, balanced on 12 inches of concrete bristling with glass and wire, and below me, on the other side, was the street. The outside world. 30 feet below. Too far to jump. I'd break both legs. Maybe my spine. Behind me, a guard reached the base of the wall and raised his rifle. Last warning. I looked at the street below. I looked at the sky above, black and starless, Cairo's light pollution blotting out heaven itself. And I jumped. I didn't think about it. I didn't calculate the distance or the landing or the probability of survival. I just stepped off that wall into empty air, into gravity, into the hands of a God I'd only known for 6 months, a God who'd saved me once before in a refugee camp in Sudan when Janjaweed militia had surrounded me and a lion, an actual lion, had walked out of nowhere and stood between me and my killers until they fled in terror. Jesus, catch me, I whispered as I fell. The air rushed past my face. The ground came up fast. Too fast. I saw the concrete sidewalk, the parked cars, the dark windows of sleeping apartments. I was going to hit. I was going to shatter. I was going to. I landed on my feet. Not gently. Not softly. But I landed on my feet, and I felt the impact shudder through my legs, through my spine, through my skull, and then I felt nothing. No broken bones. No torn ligaments. No shattered ankles. I was standing. Bleeding, barefoot, wearing a shredded nightgown in the middle of a Cairo street at 3 a.m, but standing. Behind me, I heard shouting from inside the palace walls. The guards were running to the gate, to their vehicles, to hunt me down. I had maybe 90 seconds before they reached the street. I ran. My feet slapped against hot pavement, leaving bloody footprints behind me. I ran past shuttered shops and sleeping beggars and stray dogs that watched me with yellow eyes. I ran toward the only place I knew to run, toward the Coptic church 3 kilometers away, the church where I'd first heard about Jesus, where I'd first prayed in his name, where the priest had baptized me in secret and warned me, "Sister, if you confess Christ here in Egypt, you must be ready to suffer. And you must be ready for God to do miracles. Because in this part of the world, survival itself is a miracle." I didn't know how I was running. My body should have been broken from that fall. My hands should have been useless from the cuts. My feet should have been torn apart by the glass and pavement. But I was running like I had wings, like something invisible was carrying me, like my feet barely touched the ground. I turned a corner and saw headlights behind me. They'd made it to the street. They were coming. But let me take you back. Let me take you back to the war zone where this impossible story began. Let me take you back to Sudan, to the refugee camp, to the day I stopped being Muslim and started following Jesus, the day that made Prince Amir hate me enough to kidnap me, imprison me, and swear he'd kill me rather than let me go. Let me take you back to the first miracle. Because you need to understand, I didn't start believing in miracles. I witnessed one. I lived through one. And that first impossible rescue was just the beginning. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to witness another biblical miracle, in 2024. In modern Egypt. In a palace owned by wealth and power and corruption. I was about to see Jesus prove, one more time, that he is not a dead prophet. He's a living Savior. And he still moves heaven and earth to save his children. Prince Amir al-Rashid wasn't his real name, I learned that later. His family didn't use Prince officially, but everyone called him that because his grandfather had been Egyptian royalty before the revolution, and his father had rebuilt the family fortune through oil contracts, real estate, and connections so deep into the government that laws simply didn't apply to them. Amir was 38 years old, educated at Oxford, spoke 5 languages, and collected women the way other men collected cars. I was supposed to be number 4. His 4th wife. Except I'd made the fatal mistake of saying no. I met him at the refugee processing center in Cairo. I'd been there for 3 months, waiting for asylum papers, sleeping on a cot in a room with 40 other women, eating 1 meal a day from the UN food distribution. I was 26 years old and I'd already died 1,000 times, survived the Darfur genocide, watched my village burn, lost my family to Janjaweed bullets, walked across the desert into South Sudan, lived in a camp where children died from diarrhea and women were raped by the very soldiers supposed to protect us. When I finally made it to Egypt, I thought I'd reached safety. I thought the worst was behind me. I was so wrong. Amir came to the center as part of a charity initiative. Rich Egyptians sometimes did this, showed up with cameras and journalists, handed out food packages, took photos with grateful refugees, then left feeling good about themselves while we went back to our hell. But Amir didn't leave. He stood in the corner of the processing room, watching. His eyes moved from woman to woman, evaluating, calculating. When his eyes landed on me, they stopped. I was wearing a hijab, I was still Muslim then, still praying 5 times a day to Allah, still fasting, still believing that if I was pious enough, obedient enough, my suffering would end. I kept my eyes down, the way good Muslim women are supposed to. But I felt his stare like a physical weight. He approached me. Smiled. His teeth were perfectly white, probably veneered. He smelled like expensive cologne, oud and amber, the kind that costs more than most refugees see in a year. "Sister," he said in Arabic, his voice smooth as oil, "you look like you've been through much hardship. May Allah reward your patience." I nodded, kept my eyes down. "Alhamdulillah," I whispered. "Praise be to God." "You're Sudanese?" he asked. "Yes, Sayyidi." "Sir." "From Darfur?" I nodded again. I didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to remember the day the Janjaweed horsemen rode into our village, didn't want to see my mother's face again as the bullet hit her chest, didn't want to hear my little brother screaming for me as they dragged him away. I'd spent 3 years trying to forget. Trying to survive. Trying to believe God had a plan. "You've suffered because of your faith," Amir said softly. "Because you're Muslim in a region where the government wants to erase Islam. I understand. My family supports refugees like you. We believe in helping our brothers and sisters." I looked up at him then, just for a second, and that was my mistake. Because in that second, he saw my face clearly. Saw that despite the trauma, despite the starvation, despite everything, I was still young. Still unbroken enough to be shaped. Still valuable. He smiled wider. "What's your name, sister?" "Amira," I said quietly. "Amira," he repeated, like he was tasting the word. "Beautiful. It means princess in Arabic. Did you know that?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "I run a foundation that helps refugee women. Job training, housing assistance, education. I'd like to help you. Call this number tomorrow." He pressed the card into my hand. His fingers lingered on mine for just a moment too long. Long enough for my skin to crawl. Long enough for warning bells to ring in the back of my mind. But I was desperate. Desperate enough to ignore the bells. Desperate enough to think, maybe this is Allah's provision. Maybe my prayers are finally being answered. I called the number the next day. Within a week, I'd been moved out of the refugee center into an apartment. A small 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, luxury beyond imagination after months on a cot. There was food in the refrigerator. Clean clothes in the closet. A real bed with sheets that smelled like lavender. Amir's foundation paid for everything. In exchange, I was supposed to attend job training classes, learn computer skills, prepare for employment. But the classes never happened. Instead, Amir visited. 3 times a week at first, then daily. He brought gifts, new hijabs, perfume, jewelry. He took me to restaurants where the bill for one meal could have fed 100 refugees. He talked about his life, his travels, his wealth. And slowly, carefully, like a spider spinning a web, he began to talk about marriage. "Amira, you're special," he said one evening over dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Nile. "You're not like other women. You've suffered, yes, but it's made you strong. Beautiful. Resilient. I want to take care of you. Protect you. I want you to be my wife." My stomach dropped. I set down my fork. "Sayyidi, I'm honored, but I can't. I'm not ready for marriage. I'm still healing from—" "I know," he interrupted, reaching across the table to take my hand. His grip was firm. Too firm. "I know you've been through trauma. That's why I'll be patient. I'll be gentle. I'll give you time. But Amira, understand, I'm offering you a life. Security. You'll never be hungry again. Never be afraid again. You'll be the wife of a powerful man. You'll want for nothing." I pulled my hand away. "I'm grateful for everything you've done. But I can't marry you. I don't. I don't love you." His smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. Something cold. Something dark. "Love will come," he said softly. "In time. Insha'Allah." I should have run that night. Should have grabbed my passport, the refugee papers his foundation had helped me get, and disappeared into Cairo's slums. But I didn't. Because where would I go? Back to the refugee center? Back to sleeping 40 women to a room, back to 1 meal a day, back to waiting years for asylum? I convinced myself I could manage this. Keep saying no. Keep the boundaries. He'd eventually lose interest and move on. I was so naive. 2 weeks later, he proposed officially. Got down on one knee in my apartment, the apartment he owned, I realized suddenly, and presented a ring that probably cost more than most Egyptians earned in a lifetime. A massive diamond surrounded by emeralds. It looked like a shackle. "I can't," I said again. Firmer this time. "Please, Amir, I respect you, but I can't marry you." He stood slowly. Placed the ring box on the table. And when he looked at me, the mask finally dropped. The charming smile disappeared. What was left was cold, calculated rage. "You think you have a choice," he said quietly. Dangerously. "You think because you said no a few times, I'll just walk away?" "Amira, let me explain how this works. This apartment? Mine. Your refugee papers? Processed through my connections. Your legal status in Egypt? Depends entirely on my continued support. If I make one phone call, you'll be deported back to Sudan tomorrow. Back to Darfur. Back to the militias. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I couldn't breathe. The walls of the apartment, my beautiful, safe apartment, suddenly felt like a cage. "I've been patient," he continued, his voice rising now. "I've been respectful. I've given you time. And this is how you repay me? By rejecting me? By humiliating me? Do you know how many women would kill for this opportunity?" "Then marry one of them," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Please. I don't want to marry you. I can't. He stepped closer. So close I could smell the oud cologne, now sickening instead of expensive. You'll marry me, he said softly. Or you'll suffer. Those are your options. Choose wisely, Amira. Because I always get what I want. Always. He left. Locked the apartment door from the outside. I heard the deadbolt click. Heard his footsteps fade down the hallway. And I realized, with growing horror, that I wasn't in an apartment. I was in a prison. A comfortable, beautifully decorated prison, but a prison nonetheless. I ran to the windows. Locked. Sealed shut with some kind of mechanism I couldn't open. I tried the door. Locked from outside. I grabbed my phone to call for help. No signal. He'd cut off my service. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. I collapsed on the floor and did the only thing I could do. I prayed. Allah, help me. Please, help me. Send someone. Send a miracle. I can't do this. I can't marry this man. Please. But heaven was silent. For 3 days, no one came. Food appeared, slid under the door in containers, but no person. No voice. Just silence and locks and the growing realization that Prince Amir al-Rashid wasn't going to take no for an answer. And if I kept refusing, he wouldn't just deport me. He'd destroy me. Break me. Make me wish for death. On the 4th day, the door opened. Amir stood there with 2 large men in suits. Security. Bodyguards. Enforcers. We're going to my family estate, he said calmly, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just imprisoned me. You'll stay there until the wedding. For your safety, of course. Cairo can be dangerous for refugee women. You'll be much better protected on the estate. No, I said. My voice was shaking, but I said it. No. I won't go. He sighed. Nodded to the men. They grabbed my arms, rough, professional, and dragged me toward the door. I screamed. Fought. Kicked. It didn't matter. They were too strong. They carried me down the stairs, into a black Mercedes with tinted windows, and drove me out of Cairo into the desert, into the palm-lined driveway of a compound that looked like something from a movie. High walls. Guard towers. Surveillance cameras. A palace in the middle of nowhere. My new home. My golden prison. They threw me into a bedroom and locked the door. Prince Amir stood in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks. You'll learn to love me, he said. Or you'll learn to obey me. Either way, in 3 months, you'll be my wife. And Amira, if you try to run, if you try to contact anyone, if you cause any problems, I'll make sure you disappear. Permanently. Do you understand? I understood. I understood that I'd been hunted, captured, and caged. I understood that Allah, if he was even listening, had abandoned me. I understood that I had 3 months. Maybe less. To figure out how to escape or to accept my fate as the 4th wife of a monster. That night, locked in my gilded bedroom, I cried until I had no tears left. And in my desperation, I remembered something a Christian aid worker had told me months ago in the refugee camp, right before she was killed by extremists. She'd whispered to me, if you ever feel abandoned by God, if you ever feel like your prayers bounce off the ceiling, call on Jesus. Just once. Just try. He answers when others are silent. I'd dismissed it then. I was Muslim. Jesus was just a prophet, not God. Calling on him would be shirk, blasphemy, the unforgivable sin. But lying there in that locked room, facing a forced marriage to a man who saw me as property, I thought, what do I have to lose? If Allah won't answer, maybe someone else will. So I prayed the most dangerous prayer of my life. Jesus, I whispered into the darkness, if you're real, if you're more than a prophet, I need you. I need someone to save me. Because I can't save myself. And that prayer, that simple, desperate, forbidden prayer, was about to change everything. The first week in the palace, I prayed to Allah 5 times a day. I performed wudu, the ritual washing, in the marble bathroom attached to my locked bedroom, using water from the golden faucets. I spread my prayer mat toward Mecca and prostrated myself on silk Persian rugs worth more than my entire village had owned. I recited the prayers I'd memorized as a child, the Arabic flowing automatically from my lips. Allahu Akbar. God is greatest. Subhana Rabbil Azim. Glory be to my Lord, the Most Great. But the words felt hollow. Empty. Like shouting into a void and hearing only your own echo. I'd spent my entire life as a Muslim. I'd worn hijab since I was 9 years old. I'd fasted during Ramadan even when we were starving, even when my stomach cramped with hunger so badly I couldn't stand. I'd memorized Quranic verses, followed the rules, lowered my gaze, covered my body, been the modest, obedient daughter my parents raised me to be. And what had it gotten me? My parents were dead. My village was ash. My country was a graveyard. And now I was locked in a palace, the property of a man who thought wealth and power gave him the right to own a human being. Where was Allah in all this? Where was the mercy, the compassion, the justice I'd been promised? I prayed and prayed and prayed, and heaven stayed silent. The ceiling of my golden cage might as well have been made of concrete for all the good my prayers did. By the second week, Prince Amir began joining me for dinner. Not asking, commanding. His servants would unlock my door at 7 o'clock sharp, and I'd be escorted to a private dining room where he sat at the head of a table laden with food I couldn't eat. My stomach was twisted in knots of fear and anger. Lamb chops and saffron rice and honey-soaked pastries. I'd dreamed of food like this in the refugee camp, but now it all tasted like sand. He'd talk during these dinners, as if we were a normal couple having a normal conversation. He'd tell me about his day, his business deals, his travels. He'd ask me questions I didn't want to answer. What was your life like in Sudan? What did your father do? Did you have siblings? I gave him nothing. One-word answers. Silence when I could get away with it. But Amir was patient. Terrifyingly patient. He'd smile at my defiance, like it amused him. Like breaking me was a game he knew he'd eventually win. You're strong, he said one night, swirling wine in his glass, alcohol, which he drank freely despite calling himself Muslim when it suited him. I like that about you. Most women would have accepted this by now. Would have realized how good they have it. But you keep fighting. It's attractive. I wanted to throw my plate at his face. Wanted to grab the knife beside my untouched lamb chop and drive it into his chest. But there were always guards outside the door. Always surveillance cameras in the corners. Always the knowledge that if I attacked him, I wouldn't just be killed, I'd be tortured first. Made an example of. So I sat there, silent, while he talked and smiled and planned our wedding like I'd already agreed to it. After dinner, they'd lock me back in my room. I'd return to my prayer mat. Allah, please, I'd beg, tears streaming down my face, forehead pressed to the floor. Please hear me. I'm your servant. I've obeyed you my whole life. Why are you doing this to me? Why won't you answer? Why won't you save me? Nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of my own sobbing. By the third week, I stopped eating almost entirely. Not intentionally at first, my body just rejected food. Everything I swallowed came back up. I lost weight rapidly, my face hollowing out, my wrists becoming fragile bird bones. Amir noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. "You need to eat," he said, his voice edged with irritation. "You're making yourself sick." "This is childish, Amira." "Then let me go," I whispered. It was the first time I'd spoken to him voluntarily in days. "If you actually care about me, let me go." His hand slammed down on the table so hard the wineglasses shook. "I'm giving you everything," he shouted. "Safety. Wealth. A life most people would kill for. And you want to throw it away? To go back to what? A refugee camp? Poverty? You'd rather starve in a tent than eat at my table?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. I would rather die free than live as his possession. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working, rage and something else, maybe respect, maybe hatred, flickering in his eyes. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and said quietly, "You'll learn. One way or another, you'll learn." That night, they stopped bringing me food. For 3 days. Punishment. The water kept running, they weren't trying to kill me, just break me, but no food appeared under the door. My already empty stomach cramped and burned. I grew weak, dizzy. I spent most of my time lying on the bed, too exhausted to even cry. I prayed through it. "Allah, are you testing me? Is this a test of faith? I'll pass it, I swear I will. Just tell me what to do. Just give me a sign." No sign came. On the third day without food, my bedroom door opened. A woman entered, middle-aged, wearing an abaya, her face kind but tired. She carried a tray. Soup and bread and fruit. She set it on the table by the window and looked at me with something like pity. "Eat," she said softly in Arabic. "The prince says you may eat now. But he wants you to understand, your comfort here depends on your cooperation. Make this easy, child. Accept what cannot be changed." "I can't," I whispered. "I can't marry him." She sighed. Sat down on the edge of my bed. "Why not? He's wealthy. Handsome. He could have any woman he wants, and he chose you. You should be grateful. He's a monster." She shook her head. "He's a man. And men like him always get what they want. You're not the first woman to be brought here. There were others before you. The ones who fought, they didn't fare well. The ones who submitted, they lived comfortable lives. Some even grew to love him." My blood ran cold. What happened to the ones who fought? She stood up, her eyes suddenly distant. "Haunted. Eat," she said again. "Before the food gets cold." Then she left, locking the door behind her. I stared at the tray. My body screamed for the food. But my mind was stuck on her words. There were others before you. How many? What happened to them? Were they still alive? Or were they buried somewhere on this vast estate, disappeared, erased, forgotten? I ate the soup. Not because I forgave him. Not because I was cooperating. But because I realized, if I was going to escape this place, I needed strength. I needed to survive long enough to find a way out. That night, I prayed to Allah again. But this time, my prayer was different. Raw. Angry. "Allah, I don't understand you anymore. I've done everything right. I've obeyed every rule. And you've let me suffer again and again and again. My family is dead. My country is destroyed. And now I'm locked in this palace with a man who sees me as property. Is this your plan for me? Is this your mercy? Because if it is, I don't want it anymore. It was the first time in my life I'd ever spoken to God with anything but reverence. The first time I'd dared to question, to challenge, to say out loud what I'd been thinking for months: maybe Allah doesn't care. Maybe He never did. The thought terrified me. In Islam, doubting God is dangerous. Questioning His wisdom is sinful. But I couldn't help it anymore. The doubts had been growing for years, since the day I watched my mother die, since the day I walked through the desert and saw children's bodies half buried in sand, since the day I arrived at the refugee camp and saw women being raped by the very men supposed to protect us while everyone said, "It's Allah's will." Everything is Allah's will. What kind of God wills that? What kind of mercy looks like this? I spent the next few days in a fog of despair. I complied enough to avoid punishment, ate when food was brought, wore the expensive dresses Amir's servants laid out for me, sat through dinners where he talked and I nodded numbly. But inside, I was dying. Slowly. Spiritually. The part of me that had always believed in good, in justice, in God, that part was withering. One night, during dinner, Amir reached across the table and took my hand. I didn't pull away. Didn't have the energy anymore. "You're learning," he said, pleased. "Good. I knew you would. You're too smart to keep fighting a battle you can't win." He stroked my knuckles with his thumb. "The wedding is in 6 weeks. We'll have it here, private ceremony, just family and a few friends. And then we'll travel, Paris first, I think. You'll love Paris. I'll buy you anything you want. You'll see, Amira. Your life is going to be beautiful." I looked at him. Really looked at him. At his expensive suit, his perfect hair, his confident smile. He genuinely believed he was offering me something good. He genuinely thought that wealth and luxury would make up for the fact that he'd kidnapped me, imprisoned me, threatened me. In his mind, he was the hero of this story. The generous prince rescuing the poor refugee. He didn't see me as human. Just as something beautiful he wanted to own. "I need to pray," I said quietly. "May I be excused?" He smiled wider, thinking this was more compliance, more submission. "Of course. Faith is important. I respect that about you." They escorted me back to my room. Locked the door. I went through the motions of wudu, washing my hands and face and feet. I spread out my prayer mat. But when I knelt down, I didn't face Mecca. I didn't know where to face. Didn't know who to pray to anymore. And then I remembered the Christian woman in the refugee camp. Her name had been Miriam. She'd worked for a small NGO that distributed food. She was Egyptian, Coptic Christian, probably in her 50s. She'd always been kind to me, always smiled, always had an extra bread roll to slip into my hand when the official rations ran out. One day, I'd asked her, "Why do you help us?" "We're Muslim. Your people and our people have fought for generations." She'd laughed. A warm, genuine laugh. "Because Jesus told me to love my enemies. And you're not my enemy, Habibti. You're my sister." "But we worship different gods," I'd said, confused. "No," she'd corrected gently. "You worship Allah. I worship Jesus. But here's the difference, dear one, I don't just worship Him. I know Him. He talks to me. He answers me. He shows up when I call. That's not religion. That's relationship. I'd dismissed it. Shirk. Blasphemy. Christians were misguided, taught from childhood that they'd corrupted the truth. But then, a week later, extremists had stormed the distribution center. They'd lined up the NGO workers. They'd demanded everyone recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. Those who refused were shot. Miriam refused. I watched from where I was hiding behind a stack of rice bags. Watched the militant put a gun to her head. Watched her smile, actually smile, and say, "Jesus is Lord. He died for you too. It's not too late." He shot her. But before she died, she turned her head, saw me hiding, and mouthed 3 words, "Call on Jesus." Then she was gone. I'd had nightmares about that moment for months. But now, kneeling on my prayer mat in my golden prison, I heard those words again. Call on Jesus. What did I have to lose? Allah wasn't answering. My prayers bounced off the ceiling and fell back down like dead birds. I was 6 weeks away from a forced marriage, a life of captivity, slow death of my soul. So I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that felt like jumping off a cliff. Something that might condemn me to hell, if hell even existed anymore, if God even cared. I whispered, Jesus. Just his name. I didn't know any Christian prayers. Didn't know how to talk to him. Didn't know if he'd even listen to a Muslim woman who'd spent her whole life believing he was just a prophet, not God. Jesus, I said again, louder this time. If you're real, if you're really God like Miriam said, I need you. Allah won't answer me. Maybe I've committed too many sins. Maybe I'm too far gone. But Miriam said you died for everyone. Even me. So if that's true, if you really can hear me, please. Help me. Save me. Because I can't save myself. I waited. Half expecting nothing. Half expecting lightning to strike me for blasphemy. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Just for a moment. Like a warm hand on my shoulder. Like a whisper I couldn't quite hear but somehow understood, I've been waiting for you to ask. I gasped. Opened my eyes. The room looked the same silk curtains, same locked door, same prison. But something inside me had shifted. Cracked open. Like a door I didn't know existed had just swung ajar. I didn't hear angels. Didn't see visions. Didn't experience some dramatic conversion. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like someone was actually listening. Like my prayer hadn't just evaporated into emptiness. I slept that night without nightmares. And when I woke up the next morning, there was a strange, stubborn hope growing in my chest. I didn't know what was going to happen. Didn't know how I'd escape or if I even would. But I felt, somehow, that I wasn't alone anymore. I'd called on Jesus. And he'd answered, not with words, but with presence. I didn't know it yet, but that simple prayer, that desperate cry, had just set something in motion. Something bigger than me. Bigger than a mirror. Bigger than walls and locks and guards and power. Heaven had been silent when I prayed to Allah. But the moment I called on Jesus, the moment I said his name, everything changed. And the miracle that was coming, the impossible, undeniable miracle, was about to prove that he is not just a prophet. He is God. He is alive. And he still moves heaven and earth to save his children. I didn't tell anyone about that first prayer to Jesus. How could I? In the palace, I was surrounded by Muslim staff, the servants who brought my food, the guards who stood outside my door, even the woman who'd warned me about the others who'd fought back. If they knew I'd called on Jesus, they might report me to Amir. And if Amir found out I was flirting with Christianity, he wouldn't just be angry about my refusing to marry him, he'd be enraged about my apostasy. In Islam, leaving the faith is punishable by death. I'd be signing my own execution order. So I kept it secret. During the day, I maintained the appearance of being a good Muslim girl. I wore hijab when Amir's family visited. His mother came once, a cold woman dripping with jewelry who looked at me like I was livestock being inspected before purchase. I sat through dinners with Amir, still mostly silent but less defiant, calculating that if he thought I was softening, he might lower his guard. And every evening, when the servants came to check on me, I made sure my prayer mat was visible, positioned toward Mecca. But at night, when the palace grew quiet and the guards changed shifts and I was truly alone, I prayed differently. I didn't know how Christians prayed. Didn't know if there were specific words or rituals or times. So I just talked. Like Jesus was sitting in the room with me. Like he could actually hear me. Jesus, I'd whisper into the darkness, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if you're really listening or if I'm losing my mind. But here's the thing, you're the only one who's answered. When I prayed to you the first time, I felt something. Peace. Like someone actually cared. So I'm praying to you again. I need help. I need a way out of here. I'm running out of time. And then I'd tell him everything. Things I'd never told anyone. The nightmares I still had about watching my mother die. The guilt I carried for surviving when my family didn't. The shame of what had happened to me in the refugee camp, things I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself they never happened. The fear that maybe I deserved this, maybe Allah was punishing me for some sin I didn't even know I'd committed. I'd been angry at God my whole life, I confessed one night, tears streaming down my face. I just didn't know it until now. I've been following all the rules, doing everything right, but inside I've been screaming, why? Why did you let my family die? Why did you let me suffer? What did I do to deserve this? And Allah never answered. Not once. So maybe I'd been praying to the wrong God this whole time. Maybe you're the real one. Maybe that's why Miriam smiled when they shot her. Maybe she knew something I didn't. I paused, wiping my face with the sleeve of my nightgown. If you're real, Jesus, if you really died for people like me, show me. Not because I deserve it. I know I don't. But because I need to know. I need to know if there's actually a God who cares, or if we're all just alone in the universe, suffering for no reason. Nothing dramatic happened that night. No voice from heaven, no vision, no angel appearing in my room. But again, I felt that strange peace. That sense of not being alone. And when I finally fell asleep, I dreamed. In the dream, I was back in my village in Darfur. But it wasn't burning. The houses were intact, the trees were green, the sky was blue and clear. I saw my mother standing in the doorway of our home, and she was smiling. Not the tired, worried smile she'd worn in real life, but a genuine, peaceful smile. She looked happy. Whole. Mama? I called out, running toward her. She opened her arms. But before I reached her, a figure stepped between us. A man. Tall, wearing simple white clothing, with kind eyes that somehow felt familiar even though I'd never seen him before. Not yet, he said gently. She's safe. But you still have work to do. Who are you? I asked, though somewhere deep inside, I already knew. He smiled. You know who I am. You called my name. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding, the dream so vivid it felt more real than the palace around me. I sat up in bed, pressing my hands to my chest, and whispered, "Jesus?" No answer. Just the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a guard's footsteps in the hallway. But something inside me had shifted again. Grown stronger. That crack in my soul had opened wider, letting in light I didn't know existed. I couldn't explain it. Couldn't rationalize it. But I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that Jesus had just shown me my mother. Had let me see that she was okay. That death wasn't the end. That there was more than just this life of suffering and injustice. And if he could do that, if he could give me peace in a dream, if he could let me see my mother again, maybe he could do more. Maybe he could actually save me. The next morning, during breakfast with Amir, I did something risky. Something that might have been suicidal or brilliant, I still don't know which. "May I ask you a question?" I said, breaking the usual silence. He looked up from his omelette, surprised. I rarely spoke voluntarily. "Of course. Ask me anything. What do you believe about Jesus?" His eyebrows rose. "Jesus? The Prophet Isa?" I nodded. He shrugged. "What every Muslim believes. He was a great prophet. Performed miracles. Will return at the end times." "Why do you ask?" "In the refugee camp, I met Christians," I said carefully. "They said Jesus was more than a prophet. That he was God. That he died for our sins and rose from the dead. Do you think that's possible?" Amir's expression darkened immediately. "No," he said sharply. "That's blasphemy. Christians have corrupted the truth. Allah has no son. Jesus was just a man, a messenger. Nothing more." "But what if?" "Amira." His voice was cold now. "Dangerous." "Why are you asking about this? Did someone in this household say something to you? Are the servants filling your head with Christian nonsense?" "No," I said quickly. "I was just curious. In the camp, I saw a Christian woman die for her faith. She could have saved herself by converting, but she didn't. She chose to die. I've been wondering why someone would do that." Amir leaned back in his chair, studying me. "She was a fool," he said flatly. "Brainwashed by Western propaganda. This is exactly why I keep you isolated here, Amira. The outside world is full of corrupting influences. But here, you're safe. Protected. You'll remain a good Muslim woman, and our children will be raised properly, in the true faith. Our children." The words made my stomach turn. He was already planning it. Already seeing me as the mother of his sons, the vessel for his legacy. I lowered my eyes. "You're right." "I'm sorry I asked." He relaxed, satisfied that he'd corrected my thinking. "It's natural to have questions. But bring them to me, not to servants or memories of dead Christians. I'll guide you. That's what a husband does." I nodded submissively, but inside, I was screaming. Because his reaction had told me everything I needed to know. If I was going to follow Jesus, if I was going to truly convert, I couldn't let anyone in this palace know. It would be a death sentence. Or worse, a life sentence with Amir, who would see my conversion as a personal insult, a betrayal that needed to be beaten out of me. That night, I prayed to Jesus again. But this time, I made a decision. "Jesus, I don't fully understand who you are yet. I don't know all the theology or the rules or the right way to follow you. But I believe you're real. I believe you heard me. I believe you showed me my mother. So I'm choosing you. Right now." In this locked room, in this prison, I'm choosing to follow you instead of Allah. I don't know what that means or what's going to happen to me. But if you're willing to accept a messed up, broken, scared Muslim girl who doesn't have much to offer, I'm yours. I waited, half expecting to feel guilty, to feel the weight of committing the unforgivable sin of shirk. But instead, I felt free. Like chains I'd been carrying my entire life had just fallen off. I started crying, not from sadness this time, but from relief. From joy. From the overwhelming sense that I'd just made the most important decision of my life. I don't know how to be a Christian, I continued through my tears. I don't have a Bible. Don't know any prayers except the Muslim ones. But Miriam said you want a relationship, not just religion. So here I am. This is me. Broken and trapped and terrified. But yours. And then I felt it again, that warm presence, like invisible arms wrapping around me. Like I was being held by someone infinitely strong and infinitely gentle. I heard no audible voice, but words formed in my mind, clear as day, you are my beloved daughter. I bought you with my blood. And I will get you out of here. Trust me. I sobbed harder, doubling over, pressing my face into my hands. How? I whispered. How will you get me out? The walls are too high. The guards are everywhere. Amir is too powerful. How? The answer that came wasn't what I expected, the same way I got you out before. Before. My mind flashed back to Sudan. To the refugee camp. To the day I'd been surrounded by Janjaweed militia, certain I was about to be raped and murdered. To the moment when a lion, a wild lion that had no business being anywhere near a refugee camp, had walked out of nowhere and stood between me and my attackers. The militia had fled in terror. The lion had stayed for 3 hours, lying at my feet like a guard dog, before finally wandering back into the desert. I'd told myself it was coincidence. A fluke. Wild animals sometimes wandered near camps looking for food. The timing was just lucky. But now, alone in this palace, I realized it wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. It was Jesus. He'd saved me before I even knew his name. Before I'd prayed to him. He'd sent a lion to protect me because he already loved me, already saw me, already had a plan. You sent the lion, I whispered. That was you. The presence grew stronger, warmer, until I could barely breathe from the weight of it. And I knew, absolutely, undeniably knew, that Jesus had been with me all along. Through every horrible moment, every loss, every trauma. He'd never left. I just hadn't known to look for him. Okay, I said, wiping my face, my voice steadier now. Okay. I trust you. I don't know how you're going to do this, but I trust you. Just, please. Don't let me marry this man. Don't let me lose myself here. I'd rather die than become his wife. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No nightmares. No anxiety. Just peace. The next morning, something strange happened. The woman who usually brought my breakfast, a quiet Egyptian woman in her 30s, set down the tray and hesitated. She glanced at the door, making sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. You prayed differently last night, she whispered. My blood ran cold. What? I heard you. I was in the hallway. You didn't pray toward Mecca. And you said, a name. She paused, searching my face. You said Jesus. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. This was it. She was going to report me. Amir would find out. Everything was over. But then she did something that shocked me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden cross on a chain. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. "I'm Coptic," she whispered. "Christian. I've been praying for you since the day you arrived. I knew the prince would try to break you, to force you to marry him. But last night, when I heard you call on Jesus, I knew. He's going to save you. I don't know how, but he will. Keep this hidden. Pray to him. And when the time comes, when he opens the door, run. Don't hesitate. Just run." She stood up, picked up the empty tray from yesterday, and walked out. The door locked behind her. I opened my hand and stared at the cross. It was simple, worn smooth from years of handling, probably her own personal cross that she'd just sacrificed for me. I pressed it to my lips, tears flowing again, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone." I hid the cross under my mattress, where the servants wouldn't find it during their daily cleaning. And from that day forward, I wore it around my neck at night, tucked under my nightgown where no one could see. It was a small thing. A piece of wood. But it felt like a lifeline. Proof that Jesus was real, that he was moving, that he had people planted even in this dark place to help me. The days crawled by. For weeks until the forced wedding. Then 3. Then 2. Amir grew more affectionate, more possessive, convinced that my quieter demeanor meant I'd accepted my fate. He started touching me more, holding my hand during dinner, stroking my hair, kissing my forehead when he said goodnight. Every touch made my skin crawl, but I endured it. Because I was waiting. Watching. Looking for the door Jesus promised he'd open. And then, one night, the woman, I learned her name was Salma, slipped a note under my dinner tray. It said, Friday. 3 a.m. The East Wall. Be ready. My heart nearly stopped. Friday was 2 days away. The East Wall was the one I could see from my window, 12 feet high, topped with broken glass and razor wire. How was I supposed to climb that? And even if I did, how would I survive the fall? But Jesus had said to trust him. Had said he'd get me out the same way he had before, with a miracle. So I prepared. I ate every meal, building back my strength. I did stretches and exercises in my room when no one was watching. I prayed constantly. Jesus, I don't know what you're planning, but I'm ready. Whatever it is, I'll do it. Just get me out of here. Friday came. That night, Amir had a business dinner in Cairo and wouldn't be back until morning. Perfect timing. At 2:45 a.m., I changed into dark clothing, tied my hair back, and tucked Salma's cross inside my shirt. I stood by the door, waiting, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. At exactly 3 a.m., I heard the lock click. The door swung open. Salma stood there, pale and shaking. "Go," she whispered. "Now. I've disabled the camera in the hallway. You have 5 minutes before the guards do their next round. The east wall, there's a section where the glass has been removed. Climb there. Hurry." "Come with me," I said. She shook her head. "I have family here. Children. I can't. But you have to survive. You have to tell people what Jesus did. Promise me." I hugged her quickly. "I promise." And then I ran. Down the hallway, through the silent palace, my bare feet silent on marble floors. Out the back door that Salma had left unlocked. Across the courtyard, past the pool, toward the east wall. And that's where we started, where you came in, with me standing at the base of an impossible wall, hearing guards shouting behind me, praying desperately for Jesus to save me one more time. I didn't know how I'd climb it. Didn't know how I'd survive the fall. But I'd prayed. I'd trusted. I'd said yes to Jesus. Now it was his turn to show up. And he did. Oh, he did. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wall. Behind me, the shouts were getting closer, guards pouring out of the palace, their boots pounding on marble, their radios crackling with urgent commands in Arabic. Find her. Check the perimeter. She can't have gone far. I looked up at the 12-foot wall. In the dim light from the palace windows, I could see the section Salma had mentioned, about 6 feet to my left, where some of the embedded glass had been removed. But even without the glass, the wall was smooth concrete. No handholds. No footholds. Nothing to grip. And at the top, the razor wire still gleamed like metal teeth, ready to tear through flesh. Jesus, I whispered, pressing my palms flat against the wall, feeling the rough concrete scrape my skin. Jesus, I can't do this. It's impossible. I'm not strong enough. I'm not tall enough. I can't. And then I remembered the lion. That massive, wild animal that had no reason to protect me, no reason to obey, no reason to stay, but it had. For 3 hours. Because Jesus commanded it to. If he could command a lion, he could help me climb a wall. I took a deep breath and jumped, reaching for anything I could grab. My fingers found a tiny crack between concrete blocks, barely a centimeter deep, but somehow my fingertips caught. I pulled myself up, my bare feet scrabbling against the smooth surface, and impossibly, miraculously, my toes found purchase in another crack. Inch by inch, I climbed. My arms were burning, my hands were bleeding from the rough concrete, my legs were trembling with effort. But I kept moving. Up. 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 Behind me, a guard rounded the corner of the pool house and spotted me. There. On the wall. She's climbing the wall. A flashlight beam hit me, bright and blinding. I squeezed my eyes shut and kept climbing. 7 feet up. 8 feet. 9. Stop or we'll shoot. My heart nearly stopped. Would they really shoot me? Would Amir have given that order? Or would they aim for my legs, wound me, drag me back and make me wish I'd never tried to escape? I didn't have time to find out. I pulled myself higher, my fingers now gripping the top edge of the wall. The section where Salma had removed the glass. But the razor wire was still there, coiled and vicious, just inches from my hands. One wrong move and it would slice me open. Last warning. Stop now. I heard the metallic click of a rifle being readied. Heard boots running toward the wall. I had seconds. Maybe less. I gripped the top of the wall, feeling the rough edge bite into my palms, and pulled myself up with every ounce of strength I had left. My arms screamed in protest. My shoulders felt like they were tearing. But I got one leg over the top, then the other, balancing precariously on 12 inches of concrete with razor wire on either side. That's when I looked down at the other side. The street side. The freedom side. It was a 30-foot drop. Maybe more. The palace was built on elevated ground, and the wall's exterior was even higher than the interior. Below me was concrete sidewalk, a parked car, a street light casting yellow light on pavement that looked hard as iron. If I jumped, I would shatter. Break both legs at minimum. Probably my spine. Maybe my skull. I'd survive the fall only to lie there broken and helpless while the guards came around to collect me. Behind me, the guards reached the base of the wall. One of them started climbing, faster and more skilled than I'd been. He'd reach me in seconds. I was trapped. Caught between an impossible drop and certain capture. Between freedom and prison. Between life and death. This was it. The moment where faith either meant something or it didn't. Where Jesus either showed up or I died trying to escape. I stood up on top of that wall, fully stood, balancing like I was walking a tightrope in the circus, and I spread my arms. The razor wire was so close I could feel it tugging at my nightgown, but I didn't care anymore. I looked up at the black sky, at the stars that were barely visible through Cairo's pollution, and I shouted, actually shouted, into the night. Jesus! You saved me with a lion. You can save me now. I'm jumping. Catch me or take me home, but I am not going back to that prison. The guard on the wall yelled, "Don't. You'll kill yourself." But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was listening to the voice inside, the one that had been whispering to me for weeks, the one that had said trust me, the one that had promised he'd get me out. And that voice said, jump. So I did. I stepped off that wall into empty air, into gravity, into the hands of a God I'd only known for 3 weeks, a God who'd asked me to trust him with my life. Time seemed to slow down. I felt the wind rush past my face, felt my nightgown billow around me, felt my stomach drop as I plummeted toward concrete that was coming up fast, too fast, impossibly fast. I saw the streetlight, saw the cracks in the sidewalk, saw every detail with crystal clarity. 30 feet. 20 feet. 10 feet. I closed my eyes and whispered, into your hands. And then I hit the ground. The impact was massive, like being hit by a car, like being dropped from a building, which I guess I had been. The force of it traveled up through my feet, through my legs, through my spine, through my entire body. Every bone rattled. Every organ shook. For a split second, I thought, this is it. I'm broken. I'm done. But then, I realized I was standing. Standing. Not crumpled on the ground. Not screaming in agony. Not lying in a pool of blood with shattered legs and a broken back. I was standing upright on 2 feet on concrete pavement, completely, impossibly, miraculously unharmed. I gasped and looked down at my legs, still working, still whole. Moved my feet, they responded. Bent my knees, no pain. Touched my spine, intact. I'd fallen 30 feet onto concrete and I didn't have so much as a sprained ankle. It was impossible. Above me, on the wall, the guard who'd been chasing me was staring down with his mouth open, his face white with shock. What? How did you? He couldn't even finish the sentence. I didn't wait to explain. I ran. My bare feet slapped against hot pavement. It was 3 a.m, but Cairo in August never really cooled down, and I sprinted down the street like I had wings. Behind me, I heard chaos. Guards shouting into radios. An alarm blaring from the palace. Car engines starting. They were coming. Amir's people, his security, his soldiers. They'd hunt me down. They had vehicles and weapons and technology. I had bare feet and a torn nightgown and nothing else. Except Jesus. I had Jesus. I ran past sleeping apartment buildings, past shuttered shops, past a homeless man who looked up at me with bleary eyes as I flew past. My lungs were burning. My legs were pumping. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice was saying, this is insane. You're a barefoot woman in a nightgown running through Cairo at 3 a.m. Where are you even going? You don't have money, papers, a phone, friends. They're going to catch you in minutes. But I didn't stop. Because I'd just jumped off a 30-foot wall and survived without a scratch. If Jesus could do that, he could do anything. I turned a corner and saw a small park, just a patch of grass and some trees, nothing special. But the trees were thick enough to provide cover. I dove into the shadows, pressing myself against a palm tree trunk, trying to catch my breath while my heart hammered like a drum in my chest. 10 seconds later, 2 black SUVs roared past on the street, heading in the direction I'd been running. Amir's security. Hunting for me. I waited until the sound of their engines faded, then I moved deeper into the park, into the darkest corner where the streetlights didn't reach. And I fell to my knees in the dirt and the grass, tears streaming down my face. "You did it," I whispered. "You actually did it. You got me out. I jumped 30 feet and I'm not broken. That's impossible. That's a miracle." And then the full weight of it hit me. What I'd just witnessed. What I'd just experienced. I'd literally thrown myself off a wall trusting that Jesus would save me, and he had. Not with a safety net or a ladder or a helicopter rescue. He'd saved me by letting me fall and protecting my body from the impact. By defying physics and gravity and every natural law. By doing the impossible. I pressed my face into the ground and sobbed. Not from fear anymore. From awe. From overwhelming, crushing, beautiful awe. "You're real," I cried into the dirt. "You're real and you saved me. Twice now. The lion and now this. You saved me twice. Why? Why me? I'm nobody. I'm just a refugee, just a girl who's made 1,000 mistakes, who doubted you until 3 weeks ago. Why would you do this for me?" No audible answer came. But that presence, that warm, powerful, gentle presence I'd felt in my locked bedroom, wrapped around me again. And I knew the answer even without words, because you're mine. Because I love you. Because I bought you with my blood and I don't let go of what's mine. I stayed there in the dirt for I don't know how long, crying and praying and thanking Jesus over and over. But eventually, reality set in. I was out of the palace, yes. But I was still in Cairo. Still in a city where Amir had connections and influence. Still barefoot, bleeding from my hands, wearing a torn nightgown, with no money and no documents. I needed to get to the Coptic church. The one where I'd first heard about Jesus, the one where Father Youssef had baptized me in secret 3 weeks ago. It was 3 kilometers away. I'd have to walk through the city, avoiding main streets, hiding from police and security cameras. If anyone stopped me, if anyone asked for ID, I'd be arrested and returned to Amir. But what choice did I have? I couldn't stay in this park. And I couldn't go to the police. In Egypt, if a wealthy man claimed a woman was his runaway wife or employee, the police almost always sided with the man. Especially if he was connected. Especially if she was a refugee with no papers. So I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and stepped out of the park. The streets were mostly empty, just a few late-night taxi drivers and some street cleaners. I kept to the shadows, walking quickly but not running. Running would attract attention. I'd gone maybe half a kilometer when I heard it. Car engines. Behind me. Getting closer. I glanced back and saw them, 2 SUVs, driving slowly, scanning the streets. Hunting. I ducked into an alley between 2 buildings, pressing myself flat against the wall, trying to disappear into the darkness. The SUVs stopped right at the entrance to the alley. Doors opened. I heard footsteps. Voices speaking Arabic. "Check that alley. She can't have gone far." I looked around desperately. The alley was a dead end, just garbage bins and a locked door. No escape. No way out. I was cornered. The footsteps were getting closer. I could see a flashlight beam sweeping across the ground, coming toward me. This was it. They were going to find me. Drag me back. And Amir would make sure I never got another chance to escape. He'd lock me somewhere even more secure. Maybe drug me. Maybe break my legs so I couldn't run. Maybe just kill me and be done with it. I pressed my back against the wall and squeezed my eyes shut. Jesus, I breathed. Jesus, please. Not now. Not after you got me this far. Please. The flashlight beam was 20 feet away. 10 feet. 5 feet. And then, from somewhere above me, I heard a sound. A soft, rustling sound. Like wings. Big wings. I opened my eyes and looked up. Perched on the edge of the building above me, silhouetted against the night sky, was the largest bird I'd ever seen. An eagle, maybe, or a vulture, I couldn't tell in the darkness. But it was massive, with a wingspan that had to be 6 feet across. And as the guard's flashlight swept toward my hiding spot, the bird suddenly launched itself off the building and dove at the guard, screeching, a piercing, terrifying sound that echoed off the alley walls. The guard shouted and stumbled backward, swinging his flashlight at the bird. What the? Get away! Get away! The bird attacked him, not violently, but aggressively enough to drive him out of the alley, swooping and diving and screeching. The guard ran back to the SUV, yelling to his partner, "There's a crazy bird in there. Attacked me out of nowhere." They both got back in the vehicle and drove away, probably thinking I'd gone in a different direction and wasn't worth dealing with a rabid bird. The moment they were gone, the bird stopped screeching. It landed on a garbage bin about 10 feet from me, folded its massive wings, and turned its head to look at me with one bright, intelligent eye. We stared at each other for a long moment. And then the bird did something that made my breath catch. It dipped its head, almost like a bow, spread its wings again, and flew away into the night. I stood there in that alley, shaking, tears streaming down my face again. "A lion," I whispered. "And now a bird. You sent a lion in Sudan and a bird in Cairo. You're showing me you're real. You're showing me you're in control. You're showing me that nothing, not walls, not guards, not distance, not danger, nothing can stop you from saving me." I walked out of that alley and continued toward the church. And I didn't hide anymore. I walked in the middle of the sidewalk, head up, bare feet bleeding but steady, nightgown torn but still covering me. Because I knew now. With absolute certainty. Jesus was with me. He'd proven it with a lion and a 30-foot fall and a bird that attacked on command. Whatever was coming next, I was ready. Because I wasn't walking alone. I was walking with the King of Kings. And he'd just shown me, in the most impossible way, that he fights for his children. I reached the Coptic church just as the sun was beginning to rise. The sky was turning from black to deep purple, and I could hear the first call to prayer echoing from a nearby mosque, that haunting sound that used to comfort me but now just reminded me of everything I'd left behind. The church was small, ancient-looking, with a worn wooden door and a simple cross carved into the stone above the entrance. It looked like it had been standing there for 1,000 years, surviving persecution after persecution, century after century. I tried the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. It was 4:30 in the morning. I knocked softly, then harder, my bloody knuckles leaving red smears on the wood. "Please," I whispered. "Please, someone be here. Father Youssef, please." Nothing. The church was silent. Behind me, I heard car engines again. Distant but getting closer. They were still searching the neighborhood, methodically checking every street. I had maybe 5 minutes before they reached this block. I pounded on the door harder. Please. Someone. I need sanctuary. Please. The door opened so suddenly I almost fell forward. An elderly man stood there in a simple brown robe, Father Youssef, the priest who'd baptized me in secret, who'd taught me the Lord's Prayer, who'd warned me that following Jesus in Egypt meant suffering. His eyes widened when he saw me, barefoot, bleeding, wearing a torn nightgown, my face streaked with tears and dirt. Amira, he gasped. What? Come in, quickly. He pulled me inside and locked the door behind us. The church interior was dim, lit only by a few candles near the altar. It smelled like incense and old stone and safety. They're hunting me, I said, my words tumbling out in a rush. Prince Amir, the man who kidnapped me, his guards are searching the city. If they find me here, they'll take me back. They'll kill me. Father, I need help. I need. Slow down, child, he said gently, leading me toward a wooden bench. Sit. Breathe. Tell me what happened. So I did. I told him everything, the palace, the forced engagement, the locked room, Salma the Christian servant, the escape, the wall, the fall. When I got to the part about jumping 30 feet and landing unharmed, Father Youssef's eyes filled with tears. Jesus saved you, he whispered. He performed a miracle. And there was a bird, I continued. When the guards cornered me in an alley, a huge bird attacked them. Drove them away. It was like it was protecting me. Like the lion in Sudan. Father Youssef gripped my hands, my bloody, torn hands, and looked into my eyes with an intensity that made me stop talking. Amira, do you understand what's happening? God is moving on your behalf. He's sending his creation, animals, birds, to protect you. This isn't coincidence. This isn't luck. This is divine intervention. You are witnessing biblical miracles happening in our time. But why? I asked. Why me? I've only been following Jesus for 3 weeks. I barely know how to pray. I don't deserve. None of us deserve it, he interrupted. That's the point. Grace isn't about deserving. It's about love. And Jesus loves you enough to command lions and birds and to catch you when you fall. Now listen, you can't stay here long. If Amir's guards come searching, they'll check churches. The cops have always been targets. But I know someone who can help. A network of believers who help refugees escape Egypt. They can get you to Sudan, maybe Kenya. Somewhere safe. Sudan? My heart sank. Father, Sudan is where I came from. It's where the Janjaweed killed my family. I can't go back. Not Darfur, he said quickly. South Sudan. The Christian areas. It's safer there. Not perfect, but safer than here. Amir can't reach you there. Before I could respond, we heard it. Loud banging on the church door. Aggressive. Demanding. Open up. Egyptian security. We're looking for a fugitive. My blood turned to ice. Father Youssef squeezed my hands once more. The crypt, he whispered. Under the altar. There's a hidden entrance. Go. Now. Stay silent no matter what you hear. He practically pushed me toward the altar. I ran, my bare feet silent on the stone floor, and found the small door hidden behind a tapestry. I pulled it open and descended narrow stone steps into darkness, into a crypt that smelled like earth and age and centuries of death. Behind me, I heard Father Youssef open the church door. Good morning, officers, he said calmly. How can I help you? We're looking for a woman, a harsh voice replied. Sudanese. Mid-20s. Wearing a nightgown. She's a criminal. A thief. We have orders to bring her in. A thief. So that's how Amir was spinning this. Not a kidnapped woman escaping her captor, but a common criminal who'd stolen from him. I haven't seen anyone, Father Youssef said. The church has been locked all night. We're searching it anyway. I heard boots on stone. Multiple men entering the church. I pressed myself against the wall of the crypt, trying to control my breathing, trying not to panic. Above me, I could hear them moving through the church, opening doors, checking rooms, their voices echoing off the ancient walls. Check everywhere, the harsh voice commanded. She was seen in this neighborhood. She's here somewhere. Please, Jesus, I prayed silently. Please hide me. Please blind their eyes. Please. There's a door behind this tapestry, one of the guards said. My heart stopped. That's just the crypt, Father Youssef said quickly. Storage for old relics. Nothing down there but dust and bones. We'll check it anyway. I heard footsteps approaching the door. Heard the handle turn. Heard the door creak open. Light from a flashlight beam spilled down the stone steps, getting brighter, closer. I looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the crypt was small and bare, just stone walls, stone floor, and a few ancient coffins stacked against one wall. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to run. The guard started descending the steps. I could see his shadow on the wall, growing larger. In seconds, he'd reach the bottom and see me. I pressed myself into the corner and closed my eyes. Jesus, I prayed. Jesus, you saved me from the wall. You saved me from the guards in the alley. Please. One more time. Save me one more time. The guard reached the bottom step. His flashlight swept across the crypt. The beam passed over the coffins, over the walls, over. It passed right over me. I opened my eyes in shock. The flashlight beam had swept directly across the corner where I was standing, but the guard didn't react. Didn't shout. Didn't see me. His eyes looked right at me, and saw nothing. He was blind to me. Completely, impossibly blind to me. Nothing down here but bones, he called up to his partners. Let's check the rest of the building. He climbed back up the stairs, and the door closed, plunging me back into darkness. I stood there shaking, my legs barely holding me up. He'd looked at me. The flashlight had illuminated me. But he hadn't seen me. Jesus had hidden me. Not physically, I was standing right there in plain sight. But spiritually, supernaturally, he'd blinded the guards' eyes. I heard the guards searching the rest of the church for another 10 minutes. Then I heard the harsh voice say, "She's not here. Let's try the next block." Boots marched out. The door closed. Silence. A few moments later, Father Youssef opened the crypt door. Amira? They're gone. Come up. I climbed the stairs on shaking legs and emerged into the church. Father Youssef was smiling, actually smiling, with tears running down his weathered face. They didn't see you, he said. The guard went down there with a flashlight and he didn't see you. Amira, do you understand what just happened? God made you invisible to them. Like Elisha and the Aramean army. Like Paul escaping Damascus. His voice broke. This is the kind of miracle we read about in Scripture. And it just happened. Here. Now. In this church. I fell to my knees right there in front of the altar, unable to stand anymore. He's real, I whispered. Jesus is real. He's not dead. He's not just a prophet. He's God, and he's alive, and he's here. Father Youssef knelt beside me. Yes. Yes, he is. And he's not done with you yet. You're alive for a reason, Amira. You have a story to tell. A testimony that will change lives. People need to hear what you've witnessed, that Jesus still does miracles, still saves, still fights for his children. We prayed together, Father Youssef in his formal Coptic way, me in my simple, broken way, thanking Jesus for saving me again and again and again. The lion in Sudan. The 30-foot fall. The bird in the alley. And now this, invisibility to my enemies. 4 miracles. In 3 weeks. Father Youssef made some calls, quiet, coded conversations in Arabic. Within an hour, a woman arrived at the church. She was maybe 40, wearing a simple dress and headscarf, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "This is Sister Marta," Father Youssef said. "She works with an underground network that helps persecuted believers escape. She'll take you to a safe house, get you cleaned up, and start the process of getting you out of Egypt." Sister Marta looked me over, taking in my torn nightgown, my bloody hands and feet, my general state of disaster, and smiled. "You've had quite a night, I hear." "You could say that," I managed. "Well, you're safe now. Come with me." I hugged Father Youssef goodbye. "Thank you," I whispered. "For baptizing me. For teaching me. For hiding me." "Thank Jesus," he said. "I just opened a door. He did everything else." He pulled back and looked at me seriously. "Amira, remember this day. Remember these miracles. Because there will be hard days ahead. Days when you doubt, when you're scared, when you wonder if God is really there. On those days, remember, he sent a lion. He caught you when you fell. He made you invisible to your enemies. He is with you. Always." I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. Sister Marta led me out a back entrance to a small car parked in an alley. We drove through Cairo as the city was waking up, shops opening, people heading to work, life continuing normally while I sat in the passenger seat of a stranger's car, wearing a torn nightgown, having just witnessed 4 biblical miracles in 3 weeks. The safe house was a small apartment in a crowded neighborhood. Inside, 3 other women were staying there, all refugees, all fleeing persecution, all with stories that made mine look almost tame. One was a former Muslim from Somalia whose family had tried to kill her for converting. Another was a Syrian woman whose village had been destroyed by ISIS. The third was a Sudanese woman like me, who'd escaped Boko Haram after they'd kidnapped and enslaved her. We were all survivors. All running. All clinging to Jesus because he was the only one who'd proven faithful. Sister Marta gave me clean clothes, bandaged my hands and feet, fed me real food, the first meal I'd eaten in peace in months. And that night, in that safe house with those 3 other women, we prayed together. We thanked Jesus for saving us. We shared our stories. We cried and laughed and marveled at how God had moved. "He sent a lion to protect you?" the Somali woman asked, her eyes wide. "Like Daniel in the lion's den?" "Yes," I said. "Exactly like that." "And you fell 30 feet and weren't hurt?" the Syrian woman asked. "Not a scratch," I confirmed. They looked at each other, then back at me. And the Sudanese woman said what they were all thinking, "Sister, you need to tell this story. To everyone. Muslims, atheists, people who think miracles ended with the Bible. You have proof. You have witnesses. You have evidence that Jesus is alive and still doing the impossible." "That's exactly what Father Youssef said," I replied. Because it's true, Sister Marta said, joining our circle. Amira, I've been doing this work for 15 years. I've helped hundreds of women escape persecution. And I've seen miracles, provisions that came from nowhere, documents that appeared impossibly, closed borders that opened. But what happened to you? For miracles in 3 weeks, including animals obeying God's commands and your body defying physics? That's biblical. That's the kind of thing that makes even skeptics stop and think. But I'm nobody, I protested. I'm just a refugee. I don't have education or platform or. Jesus chose fishermen, the Syrian woman interrupted gently. Chose tax collectors and prostitutes and nobodies. Because God doesn't use the qualified. He qualifies the ones he uses. And clearly, he's chosen to use you. That night, lying on a thin mattress in a crowded apartment, surrounded by women who'd lost everything but gained Jesus, I finally understood. I'd been asking why me, for weeks. Why would God do these miracles for me? But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't about me being special or deserving. It was about Jesus being powerful. Being real. Being alive. And he'd chosen to demonstrate that power through my story, through a broken, scared, traumatized refugee girl, so that when I told people what he'd done, they couldn't dismiss it as the testimony of some educated, privileged person who didn't really need God. I was the worst-case scenario. The most hopeless situation. Surrounded by enemies, trapped in a palace, facing forced marriage and slavery. No money, no papers, no resources, no human help. And Jesus had saved me anyway. Miraculously. Undeniably. Impossibly. So that when I said Jesus is real, people would have to listen. Because how else could I be alive? I fell asleep that night with peace flooding my soul. And I dreamed again, this time of thousands of people hearing my story. Muslims and atheists and skeptics and doubters, all listening as I told them about the lion and the fall and the bird and the invisible protection. And in the dream, they were weeping. Falling to their knees. Calling on Jesus. And I woke up knowing, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning. That everything I'd suffered, everything I'd survived, everything Jesus had done to save me, it was all preparing me for something bigger. I was going to tell my story. And through that story, Jesus was going to prove, to Muslims, to atheists, to a watching world, that he is not dead. He is risen. He is real. He is here. And he still does miracles for anyone brave enough to call on his name. I stayed in that safe house for 3 days while Sister Marta worked on getting me travel documents. The process was complicated. I couldn't use my real name because Amir had connections everywhere, and I couldn't travel on my refugee papers because they'd flag me at the border. I needed new identity documents, which meant connecting with people who understood how to navigate Egypt's bureaucratic underworld. But during those 3 days, something unexpected happened. Word spread about my escape. It started with Salma, the Christian servant who'd helped me escape from the palace. She'd been questioned by Amir's security after my disappearance, interrogated for hours about whether she'd helped me, whether she knew where I'd gone. She denied everything, played innocent, said she'd been sleeping during my escape and knew nothing. They'd believed her, or at least couldn't prove otherwise, and let her go. But Salma didn't keep quiet about what she'd witnessed. She told other Christian servants in wealthy Egyptian households. Told them about the Muslim refugee girl who'd converted to Christianity, who'd been imprisoned by a prince, who'd escaped by jumping off a 30-foot wall and surviving without injury. The story spread through Cairo's underground Christian community like wildfire, whispered in market stalls, shared in secret church gatherings, passed from believer to believer. And people wanted to meet me. Wanted to hear the story firsthand. On my second night in the safe house, Sister Marta brought in a group of 5 people, 3 Egyptian Christians and 2 former Muslims who'd recently converted. They sat in our cramped living room while I told them everything. The lion in Sudan. The palace imprisonment. The prayer to Jesus. The wall. The fall. The bird. The invisible protection in the church crypt. When I finished, there was silence. Then one of the Egyptian men, a middle-aged Copt named Bishoy, wiped tears from his face and said, "Sister Amira, I've been Christian my whole life. Born into a Coptic family, baptized as an infant, attended church every week for 43 years. And I've never witnessed a miracle. I've read about them in the Bible, heard testimonies from other countries, but I've never seen one. And now you're telling me that in 3 weeks, Jesus performed 4 miracles for you? A brand new believer?" "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Why?" he asked, and I could hear the pain in his voice. "Why does a new convert see such powerful miracles when I've been faithful my whole life and never witnessed anything supernatural?" I didn't know how to answer that. But one of the former Muslims, a woman named Layla who'd converted 6 months earlier, spoke up. "Brother Bishoy, maybe that's exactly why. Think about it. When you tell people about Jesus, they can dismiss it. You were born Christian. You've never known anything else. But when we tell people, former Muslims who had everything to lose by converting, they have to pay attention. And when we can point to miracles that saved us? Impossible things that have no natural explanation? That's proof even skeptics can't ignore." Bishoy nodded slowly. "You're right. You're absolutely right." He turned back to me. "Amira, you need to testify publicly. Not just to Christians, but to Muslims. To everyone. This story, these miracles, could change lives. Could save souls." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "If I go public, Amir will find out. He could still come after me. And what about Muslims who'll call me an apostate? In Islam, leaving the faith is punishable by death. If the wrong people hear my story, they'll kill you," Layla finished bluntly. "Yes. That's the risk. I face it every day. Every time I tell someone I left Islam for Jesus, I risk death. But Amira, you already risked death. You jumped off a 30-foot wall. And Jesus caught you. If he can do that, he can protect you from whatever comes next." The other former Muslim in the room, a young man named Ahmed who'd converted a year ago, leaned forward. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I was one of Amir's guards." The room went silent. I stared at him. "What?" "Not during your imprisonment," he said quickly. "This was 2 years ago. I worked security at his Cairo residence for 6 months. I saw what he did to women. I saw 3 different women brought to his properties, promised jobs or marriage or safety. I saw them locked in rooms, controlled, abused. One of them tried to escape. They caught her and brought her back. I never saw her again after that night. Never. And when I asked what happened to her, my supervisor just said, she learned her lesson." My stomach turned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not the first woman Amir tried to imprison. But I think you might be the first one who successfully escaped. And the only reason you made it out is because Jesus performed miracles. Those other women, they prayed to Allah, I'm sure. They begged God for help. But Allah didn't send lions or birds or supernatural protection. Jesus did. For you." He paused, his eyes intense. "That's why I converted, Amira. Because I saw what happened to people who cried out to Allah in desperation, nothing. They suffered and died and disappeared, and heaven stayed silent. But then I met Christians who'd survived impossible situations, who had testimony after testimony of Jesus showing up, of prayers being answered, of miracles happening. And I realized, we've been praying to the wrong God our whole lives. But you were one of Amir's guards, I said, still processing. You participated in evil, he finished. Yes. I did. I was complicit. And the guilt of that almost destroyed me. But when I confessed it to Jesus, when I asked him to forgive me, he did. Completely. And now I spend my life helping people escape the same system I used to enforce. That's grace, Amira. That's what Jesus does. He takes the worst of us and transforms us into something new. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze. Sister Marta went to answer it, checking through the peephole first, then opening it quickly. A man entered, tall, maybe 60 years old, wearing traditional Islamic clothing. He looked like an imam. My heart started racing. Had we been infiltrated? Was this a trap? But Sister Marta smiled. Everyone, this is Sheikh Hassan. Well, I'll let him introduce himself. The man looked at me with gentle eyes. Amira, I've been looking for you. I heard about your escape. About the miracles. And I needed to meet you because, he paused, emotion crossing his face. Because I need to hear the truth from your own mouth. I need to know if what they're saying is real. Who are you? I asked. I was an imam, he said. For 30 years. I led prayers at a mosque in Alexandria. I taught Quran to children. I believed with all my heart that Islam was the truth and Muhammad was the final prophet. But 3 months ago, something happened that shook everything I believed. He sat down, and everyone in the room leaned in to listen. One of my students, a teenage girl, came to me in tears. Her family was forcing her to marry a man 3 times her age, a man with a history of violence. She begged me to help her, to tell her parents it wasn't right. But according to Islamic law, there was nothing wrong with the marriage. The man was Muslim, had wealth, had agreed to pay the bride price. By Sharia standards, it was perfectly acceptable. I told her to submit. To trust Allah. To be obedient. And she looked at me with such devastation and said, Sheikh Hassan, if Allah wants me to suffer like this, then I don't want to know Allah. She left. 2 days later, she killed herself. His voice broke. She was 14 years old. And she killed herself rather than face that marriage. And I realized, I'd spent 30 years telling people to submit to a system that crushes women, that allows child marriage, that calls suffering Allah's will. I'd been complicit in evil, just like Ahmed was. He looked at me. I started questioning everything. Started researching. Started talking to Christians in secret. And they told me about Jesus, about a God who loves women, who protects children, who calls himself a father who would never demand his daughters suffer. And I thought, that sounds too good to be true. But then I heard about you. About the miracles. About Jesus sending a lion to protect you from militia. About you falling 30 feet onto concrete and walking away without a scratch. And I thought, if that's real, if those miracles actually happened, then Jesus is God. Because only God can command creation like that. They're real, I said quietly. Every word is true. I have scars on my hands from climbing the wall. Father Youssef can testify that the guards searched the crypt with a flashlight and didn't see me. Ahmed here can testify about what Amir does to women. And the lion, there were witnesses. Dozens of refugees in the camp who saw it happen. Sheikh Hassan closed his eyes. Then I'm done with Islam. I'm done lying to people, done telling them to submit to a God who demands suffering. I want to follow Jesus. I want to know the God who sends lions and birds and performs miracles to save his children. Will you pray with me? Will you help me convert? I looked at Sister Marta, who was crying. At Bishoy and Layla and Ahmed, who were all nodding. At this elderly imam who'd just thrown away 30 years of his life and his entire identity because my story had convinced him Jesus was real. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll pray with you. We all knelt together in that cramped living room, Christians and former Muslims and a former imam, and I led Sheikh Hassan in the simplest prayer I knew. Jesus, I don't understand everything about you yet. But I believe you're real. I believe you died for me. I believe you rose from the dead and you're alive right now. Save me. Forgive me. Make me new. I'm yours. When Sheikh Hassan opened his eyes, he was weeping. I feel it, he whispered. I feel him. Peace. Joy. Things I never felt in 30 years of Islam. He's real, Amira. Jesus is real. Over the next 2 days, more people came to the safe house. Christians who wanted to hear the testimony. Muslims who were questioning their faith and needed to hear evidence that Jesus was alive. Even an atheist, a British journalist who'd heard the story through underground channels and wanted to interview me for a story he was writing about persecution of Christians in Egypt. His name was Peter, and he was skeptical at first. Look, he said, I've heard a lot of miracle stories. They're usually exaggerated or have natural explanations or can't be verified. So before I take this seriously, I need evidence. Names of witnesses. Locations. Details that can be checked. So I gave him everything. The location of the refugee camp in Sudan where the lion appeared. The names of refugees who'd witnessed it, I couldn't remember all of them, but I gave him the ones I could. The address of Amir's palace. The name of the church and Father Youssef. The date and time of my escape. And the fall, he asked. You're claiming you jumped 30 feet onto concrete and didn't break any bones? I'm not claiming it, I said. I'm telling you it happened. Look at my feet. I showed him the soles, scraped and cut from climbing the wall and running through streets, but not the catastrophic injuries you'd expect from a 30-foot fall. If I'd landed wrong, my ankles would be shattered. My knees would be destroyed. I'd have spinal injuries. But I have none of that. How do you explain it? He couldn't. He sat there, looking at my feet, looking at his notes, and finally said, I can't explain it. Medically, you're right, that fall should have killed you or at least crippled you. The fact that you walked away, he shook his head. I'm going to investigate this. I'm going to talk to Father Youssef, try to verify the details. But if this checks out, if your story holds up under scrutiny, this is the most compelling evidence for the supernatural I've ever encountered. 3 weeks later, he published an article. I never saw it, I was already out of Egypt by then, on my way to South Sudan, but Sister Marta told me about it.